you didn't?
No, we just read her book and were motivated to make a film inspired by her book.
See, she used to stay here with us. And she'd stay with me. And a lot of times she wouldn't do it. And I think I told Gigi that one time she had these god-awful shoes on, you know.
Have to wait. Shoes. I tell you what, you give me the trigger words for your favorite stories. Shoes is one, massage is another.
Tony's going to do an editorial.
I just have to.
We were told at the Peace Pilgrim Center that you had remembered these wonderful stories, so we're so happy.
Well, aren't
to
other
be
people telling you these stories?
Yeah, we're getting quite a few, but I think not exactly these.
Hey, you.
Hello, kitty.
Let me put this right on here.
Okay, sure.
What's the kitty's name?
No. It's Jezebel.
Jezebel?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
There's a beige one, Boots. That's fine.
Jezebel. Wasn't Jezebel sort of a fallen woman?
Kind of a, well, I wouldn't say that. I think she was a very clever woman. She certainly was smart enough to get the king to marry her so she could bring Baal worship into the country.
Jezebel?
Just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
A lot
Who's
of
John?
people that night were just overwhelmed because a very deep quietness came over Peace. You know?
See, I want, when we're rolling, I want you to talk about that story because when Tony was telling us, we realized we hadn't yet heard a story where she actually touched people.
She did that night.
So she must have been moved in
That
some way.
night, she went around just touching, and John said he would never forget that.
I remember.
Because he was just moved to tears. A lot of people, it was a very what you would
special
call
kind of
sacred moment.
Yeah.
Because everything got very, very quiet, and she just moved about and touched people.
Yeah.
And people were just overwhelmed. They had never seen her like that.
We'll talk about this.
Ready when you are, Claire.
Are you ready, Cheech? Well, so here we are. Just sort of to warm up, if you would take me back to the first time you heard about her or saw her, do you remember?
That was in East Lansing, Michigan, which would have been 28 years ago. 28, I think. And she walked into the center, our Unity Center in East Lansing, and started telling me about herself. And I had never heard of her before. And then she said to me, "Don't you remember me?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "I was your teacher in Lemuria." And I said, "Well, if you were, that's wonderful." And we had a lot of fun about that. And then she stayed with me there and spoke to our group and spent about 3 days there with us in East Lansing and talked and met the people. And then she said, "I've got to be on my way." I was driving to Kalamazoo, and I said, "Can I take you to Kalamazoo?" And she said, "No, I'm walking. That's what I'm all about, walking for peace."
Now, when she said this about Lemuria, did anything ring true?
Well, she knew that I was interested in reincarnation. And then later on, when she was here, we were sitting in this very room talking, and she said, "You know, you never did answer my question when I met you the first time." And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And she said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Yes, I'm sure I remember you very well. But do you remember me as your teacher?" And I said, "It's very possible, Peace. It's very possible." But somehow she seemed to want to make some sort of connection that we had some special identity on the path. And then she said, "Well, the reason I want to get some confirmation from you is I have some material that I don't want to give to just anybody. And I will be happy to send that material to you, but I don't want you to share it with anyone. It is your material."
Hold on just a second. Let's just get these doors closed. Yeah, you can hear every single noise on these.
Oh, really?
On these microphones. So that's great.
We'll
Yeah, and
change
if you could
tapes in
somehow
about.
resist looking at Tony.
Oh, okay.
Keep it to me. 'Cause,
Okay, okay.
so tell me about that. So then did she send you material?
Yes, she did. Yes, she did. And I've used the material in lessons and classes. She had this strong feeling that somehow that a few of her students, as she considered me to be, would in our later years catch this vision about a different approach to peace, and that we would kind of pick up where she left off and go on to do something in a very positive way toward methods of peace without aggression. And she said, well, Richard, you may never walk for peace like I have done, but I have the feeling you are going to be very instrumental in some work in your early 70s or late 70s that's going to be very important, not just for the movement that you're involved in, but sort of a universal movement. And we talked about that, and I've thought about it many times, you know, what could I do? You know, because I think as a teacher, you sort of look to someone who's going to do some follow through, and you hope that what you started will carry through. And I think she wanted confirmation that this work, which she was so intent on and so thrilled about, would somehow be carried on by people that she really had loved and trusted. And so I said, well, I'm sure peace, I will find a way to work with that. And I've had lots of thoughts about it, you know, and she often just comes into my mind, and I read over her stuff over and over and over, and I keep waiting for my inspiration to come as to what I can really do to help in ways of peace.
Do you feel at liberty to share some of what the material was that she sent you?
Well, she had a lot of material that she felt people weren't ready for, and she said, I want somebody to have this, and you can incorporate it to whatever you're going to be doing, and since I probably won't be around, it need not be known other than it's your material. But this is how we move our lives forward, and how we have a continuity and the concept of eternal life, because it continues to be embraced by those who have loved us, and they will continue, and people will continue after them. But her really feeling was that there was an emergency, not only in our country, but in our world, and she did say there's going to be a lot of shaking up going on before the year 2000, and a lot of people are going to be very frightened because they don't know this inner peace that we know, and this is going to be a very big time of trauma for a lot of people. So your work and your essential knowledge and background is going to be very important, because we're going to have a lot of emotional breakdowns, a lot of mental illness, a lot of things erupting that people are just going to be very frightened. And you must remember that you are a seed, a center of peace in all of this, and you may be called upon to take some stands sometime that you really don't want to, but you will have to do it. So all these things I've thought about over the years and since she passed, and what really she was trying to convey to me.
Was this material that she herself had written?
Yes, she had written it, yes. I still have it, you know.
Are you into your 70s yet?
I am on my way to 70.
Great, so you're about to be...
Another year.
So you're about, you know...
Start my walks for peace. No, I feel very strongly about it, because she made such an influence on my life and on the lives of the people here at the church that you could never forget her. Absolutely. And as we would sit here and talk, and then in my home, she would just seem to want to keep talking. She'd say, I know you're probably tired, Richard, but I just got to get this stuff out of me. I've just got to tell somebody. It's so important, it's so vital, and you're going to feel it, you're going to feel it. And all of a sudden you're going to realize you have a job to do that you may not be too happy about being called to do, but it will be your job.
Other windows he could do first, because we've only got the 45 minutes or
Yeah,
40
you
minutes.
could count those windows.
You can do the back part.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Tony. That would be great. Yeah, we'll wait for Tony to come
I
back
think
in.
quite a few of our Unity ministers knew her quite well.
She felt so comfortable with Unity practitioners. You know,
Yes, she did.
the principles.
Yeah.
Now, is this, are these writings something that you might be guided to give to the Peace Pilgrim Center or something at some point,
Later
or
on.
Swarthmore?
Later on I
Right,
would.
Right.
The couple of heads.
Rush? Listen, John and Ann Rush?
Yeah.
I know. They
You
were
know them?
fellow students of yours. Did you know that?
No.
No, they weren't.
Oh, the Rushes were?
No.
Just Cheryl and Andy?
Carol, Andy, and the other Andy.
And
And
Eugene.
Eugene Morey.
Those
There's
are the only
another
ones I
one in
know of.
Chicago.
Those are the only ones.
Oh.
But you
this-
were all girls. Did you know that?
Is that
All the
right?
girls, girls.
You mean in Lemuria? But we had lots of fun with that stuff because, you know, she had her own opinions about such things.
Oh, that's great.
Uh,
Yeah, we have those. We're still on pause. Excuse me, Richard.
Oh.
Tell me exactly how much time we have until when do you have
an
to
hour.
leave?
I mean, I don't have to leave here until 4:30, really.
Okay.
I can
If I get a little.
work it out.
Okay, so just gotta go to this window.
No, 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 no.
Whenever you're ready, Claire.
Okay. So, now what was your background that led you to these teachings?
Okay, I grew up on a farm in Ohio, and then I went back to Ohio State University after the Second World War, and I worked 11 years as a high fashion designer and in theater. And through an illness, a series of illnesses, I really had been introduced to Unity, but I had never joined it. But I began to take it very, very seriously. And through this illness, I had what I would consider an exceptional healing, which Peace and I talked about. And something inside of me and at a while kept saying, you're going to change your vocation, you're going to make changes. And I was going to a Unity Center in New York City where Georgiana Tree West was the minister, and I walked through this Sunday and she said, when are you going to start the ministerial training? And I said, what? And she said, you are thinking about it. And that's what helped me to make my decision and go into the training.
Had you always heard an inner voice? Or
Yes, from a child. And my mother and I went to Christian Science Church. And I am very strong about its teachings because the healing aspect of the Christian Science was very important to me. But I found Unity had embraced more, not just the law of life, and this is the law, but there is also an expression of love that when the cold law or the business of law gets real rough, love moves in to comfort and bring peace and healing. So I made my transition to Unity. And Peace said to me, you know, you're going to move on from these mental sciences, which she referred to all the metaphysical work as mental science, to a mystical experience. And when that happens to you, you're going to start a new journey, not unlike mine. It was very interesting. And I feel, those talks we had together had a strong influence on my life, and always to continually look for the more mystical side of life rather than trying to work things out mentally and make things happen, to learn how to live life and allow life to happen in its own way and not like. So that was in some of her writings, that all this mental work is making things happen, but we have to get past the mental of struggling and fighting to make things happen, to then just live in the consciousness where they happen.
So what is your understanding?
Just, can we wait for
Oh,
that plane?
plane.
That should be good.
So what is your understanding of the mind?
The mind, I think, is one of the most fantastic things in all the world, because like Peace and I used to talk about the mind, the value of the mind, and how we are going to learn to use our mind in more loving ways to bring about the transformation in world affairs and all the educational systems, but we have to have the mind. But like she said, we will do like Paul said, we will learn to have this mind in us that was in Christ Jesus, which is a mind that is so filled with love that we will be able to do all of our work, and all of our associations with people will have this expression of love in it, and therefore it will have a totally different kind of power than the aggressive power that people are used to, and the struggling power. But the mind is that function of us in a physical body that not only brings the spiritual inspiration to us, but then we have the mind through which we can express that and bring it forth into creative living. And we discussed all these things, and we talk about mind and what we do with our mind, what our mind is. And
So when would you have a chance to talk?
the two of us, we'd talk till 3 o'clock in the morning. She would finish lecturing, and then we'd sit and talk and talk and talk. And in the morning, she loved to get up and have me sit with her, and I would make her breakfast and play little tricks on her, because she loved oatmeal, but she didn't know I bought an instant oatmeal and didn't have to cook it for hours. And I would throw raisins in it and currants and things like that. She'd go around saying, "Nobody cooks like Richard, He takes such interest in fixing cinnamon toast for me and things like that." So we would have a lot of fun together. And then we'd have very serious and almost tearful times together, because she would get very quiet and very reflective and say, "Well, I just need somebody to share these things with, because sometimes walking on the road I feel so alone. I feel so isolated, and it's just nice that you're willing to listen to me." And I thought, nice. How glad I am to listen to a person like you, because she'd have these wonderful stories, which you probably have heard some of them, where she was arrested and put in jail with a prostitute. And she had the opportunity to help this prostitute understand life, and made a great comeback at living. And she would just tell these fantastic stories, and the snowstorm that she got caught in. And she sees a bridge ahead in this not blistering, but blizzard. And there she sees this bridge, goes down underneath it. Here is a huge crate filled with paper and all. She crawled in there and spent all the time she needed to until the snow stopped and she could get on her way. But these stories were unbelievable and exciting.
Well, how would you describe your relationship to her?
I would say it was a very sensitive relationship, and we talked about marriage. She asked me why I had never been married, and I said, for the same reason you got out of a relationship, which really we were joking with each other. But I felt that if I were to pursue this career and my own spirituality, that I had to work on myself and that I couldn't divide myself unless another person would be so completely in that same line of thought that would allow me the right to spend these times in prayer and meditation without feeling separate from me. And so I said, like you, Peace, I reached a point where I said, it's just time for me to work on me. In this lifetime, I feel this is my opportunity to really identify with my purpose and what I'm here for. And so that's how we looked at that. And we talked about the statement of Jesus, the time will come when man will neither be given in marriage or taken in marriage, but the perfect marriage will be made in mind. You ask about mind, where the mind can conceive of the polarization of the divine feminine and masculine, and out of that union, that intermarriage, comes the immaculate conception of the Son of God. And we birth that spirit, that Christ person within us, which awakens us to wholeness, completeness. We don't feel alone, we feel complete. We don't need things. We enjoy things, but we don't need them. And I believe I'm moving through that process now of letting things go and looking for the next step on the path. Whatever it will be, I don't know.
Well, if she's right, it sounds like you have a cosmic
connection. And she said that while we both had studied some of Manly Hall's work at different times, and we talked about Manly Hall, and he said that on this journey, in this particular incarnation, we would of course honor our immediate family, but we would collect to us what would be, and how they got this number I'm not sure, but approximately 60 people that we would identify with in a very soul kind of way, and this would be our cosmic family that we had traveled with through many incarnations. And we meet again in this incarnation, not to get involved, but just to know where each other's at and where we're moving at the present time, but not to interfere with each other's growth and whatever was happening. And I feel strongly about that too, because I think of the different people. I never count them, but I think there's more than 60.
You were saying that she really was very strong-minded about what she believed.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Who other than Manly Hall did she talk about that she'd read? Do you remember?
Not too much. I believe that Peace really, in her quiet times, sought her own kind of personal revelation. She didn't want to, and she used to say, I don't want to parrot material that people have already had. Mine will sound like others, but I want it to be me, because if it does not come through me, I don't have ownership of it, and it won't be, it'll be like Paul said, it's sounding brass and a tinkling cymbal. But I want to have ownership of my message, so that when I speak to people, when I pray with people, that they will feel not only the intelligence of the mind working with this, but the love power that blends and mixes with the message, that makes it a soul message rather than a mental message. And she was trying to be very careful about that. She wanted to communicate soul to soul with other people. She said there's just too much of the mental in the world, and it's confusing people, and they're running from one religious group to another. They don't settle because they yet have not identified with a spiritual reality within themselves. And she felt that that was our real work, to awaken people that all this is good, books and teachers and all that's good, but one day you're just going to have to stop and say, hey, I've got to take time for myself and really do some work inside me and find this person I really am, this person And she felt that's what a lot of us were hungering and thirsting for, to know ourselves and to have an identity that we then might have power to be. Because she said people who don't have an identity don't have a sense of the power of God as a great strength in them. They're still struggling with this I identifying, and they seem to think it's something out here that they have to do or be or find, and eventually we have to come back and go inward and take time to be quiet. She did say that walking gave her that opportunity as she walked through the farms of Iowa and Nebraska and the prairies, that nature spoke to her all of the time. And through nature, she began to understand better the creative process that goes on not only in our planet Earth, and how it cries out for us to respond to it. So she was talking the ecology of our planet, even in those years, how she would see and she could just feel nature as she would pray and bless the trees and the wheat fields, that nature itself was calling, help me heal, help me to know peace, because the people on this planet have filled me with so many things that I do not need. I would give back to them in abundance if they didn't keep destroying me. And I thought that was really brilliant on her part. And she said she'd look in these little streams and there'd be beer cans and bottles, and she would think, how can people be so unkind to a pretty little stream that's running through that they could enjoy? And she would come up with many little folksy things like that that would touch your heart. She had a great feeling for the planet and the earth, and not unlike people. She had a great feeling for them too, but she said what we put into our thoughts, what we put into our bodies, how we eat and how we don't take care of ourselves, we're doing the same thing to our bodies that we do to our planet. And she, in some of the writings I have, she has a thing about ecology and how she felt about it, and how she felt the government was being very neglectful. And she had a great fear that, no, that's not the right word, she didn't have the fear, but she had a great concern that people in our country were continually wanting someone else to take care of them, including the government, that she had this concern that wherever she traveled, it seemed people were giving their power away. Instead of being responsible for being a citizen, they were almost giving up that power to say, well, we'll talk to a group or a committee or the government about what they can do about that. Not that I can make a difference, but maybe if I complain enough, we can get the attention of a group or a political movement that will do something. This really was a concern of hers, that we have become too complacent in our country. We take our freedom not seriously enough, and that one day we might have to fight for it. And that was in some of the things she gave me. And the prayer that people in this country would awaken to what freedom is, and that we would not be so careless about it. Because one of the things that I learned from her too was that she said, you know, people are always saying they want freedom, but they want freedom from, not freedom through. Freedom from education, not freedom through education. Freedom from responsibility rather than freedom through. And she stressed with me, whenever you say it, and she went back to the Bible saying, in David's prayer, he said, through the valley. You don't get stuck in it. She got into the 12-step programs, how she ran into so many people with problems of addiction, alcoholism. But she said they need to go through the process to their freedom, to not get stuck in a program and get hung up on a program where they can't be free. And she said, that's why I like unity, because as you've told me, Richard, people come and go in unity. They get what they need, and then you may not see them for a year, which is true, or 2 years. But when they have a need, they know where to go. They know where the well is. And you're not hung up on membership, and you're not hung up on gaining members and pushing people to become members, which she felt was a real curse in the religious world that we needed to avoid things like that. And we talked about the difference between religion and spirituality, that too many people are into the religious concept. They haven't even begun to awaken to a sense of their spirituality.
How would you define the difference?
Well, because your religion has the creeds, all of the things that thou shalt not do. But spirituality is a teaching that allows each person to build their own credo of life and then to live it. And it's not something you make happen, it's an unfolding process that allows the soul in each person to work out through their experiences, going through them, to the ultimate gift of total freedom. But it's spirit-filled. I mean, everything we do is spirit-filled. It's enthusiasm for living the abundant life, the fullness of life, and to not think that just because we say a prayer 20 times, God is going to think, gosh, aren't they wonderful? Now I'll do them a favor. So she really got into this stuff about, she didn't like affirmations in the sense that people tend to use them to make things happen in their world. She said, we have to affirm in our own belief system, and once you have that affirmation, why do you have to say it 1,000 times? I mean, either you know it or you don't know it, and the only reason you keep saying it is because you don't believe that your affirmation is working for you. And we went again to Scripture where Jesus says, don't make vain repetitions unto the Lord. I mean, know that this thing is right for you, and know the truth, and the truth will set you free, not constantly repeating things. And so she had lots of ideas about, she liked our philosophy, but she said the thing that worried her was this thing of affirmation, because people think they can affirm anything, and God is going to open the heavens and say, here you are, kid, it's all yours. But then we talked about, basically our metaphysics says affirmations are not to change anything outside of us. Affirmations are to change the way we think inside and firm up in our own consciousness what's real and true for us, so that we can move forward with faith. They change people, not things. She could agree with that.
See, this is so interesting because I've been wondering how much she understood when she set out in 1953, and how much did she grow?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have some sense of that?
Oh yes. Mm-hmm. Her whole concept about religion, about life, which she, at one time, I'm sure you're aware, lived very comfortably, but was not happy. Had what she said the world would call success, what the world would think of as having it made, so to speak, but this unrest in her soul. And then she had this vision, this calling to do this walking for peace. And she had the struggle inside of herself, because she said, why would I leave this? She obviously had beautiful gardens around her home, and she loved flowers. But she said, why would I leave this to impoverish myself? And she thought, but am I not impoverished where I am? I'm not a happy woman. I'm not what you would call a peaceful woman. My life is full of unrest. I'll give it a try. And then as she began to walk, she realized that she was richer than she had known, because she wasn't attached to anything. There was nothing that she felt she couldn't give up or let go of. And she said, Richard, it was like just shaking loose shackles of lifetimes to know this great freedom of not being bound with things.
I'm thinking now, you know how they say we teach what we need to learn? That maybe she understood things intellectually when she set out.
That's right.
And then in her walking,
It became a mystical experience to her.
did she describe to you the, you know, the cosmic, well, the vision she had, or that shift where she knew that she was to walk the pilgrimage?
Well, it came to her clear, but, you know, like most of us, we wrestle with something. Could this be meant for me? Am I really qualified? Am I really willing? Am I ready to do this? And she had her struggles, she said, about it. Even when she'd be walking and a rainstorm would come up, she'd say, well, surely, God, you know, is this really what you want me to do? But she'd say, and I learned from Peace to do what I call dialoguing with God, because she told me, Richard, I have the most wonderful dialogues with God. Sometimes I really argue with him, sometimes I get mad at him, and once in a while we have a real peaceful conversation. But she went through all this stuff, but then she would say, eventually I would start laughing and I'd have a sense of humor about the whole thing and think, okay, God, it's okay. There will be more sun and the rain is not forever. So she really taught me a lot of things, and I used that method ever after I met Peace then in dialoguing with God. She said, you do all this counseling, and when I'm here I see these people coming in unloading all their stuff on you. But she said, Richard, if they would only learn to dialogue with God, you're your own best counselor, because you talk to that higher self within you and your human self, and the two of you talk, you come up with your own answers, and you save an awful lot of money from psychiatry and all of that, because she wasn't much into doctors or psychiatry.
Yeah, paying for spiritual wisdom.
Right. And I remember one time someone said to her, oh, you look so tired, Peace. You ought to go. And she said, honey, if you're tired, you go home and go to bed. Don't worry about me. But people didn't know how to take her sometimes, because she would just come out with these things. And she stayed with another couple here, which I thought would be fun for her, because they had this marvelous house. And I thought, oh, Peace will just love that. And she called me up the next day and said, come over here and get me. I can't stand this place. It reminds me of my home. And so I went and got her, and she said, your baked potatoes are better. Your oatmeal's better. Don't ever send me there again. Just let me stay with you.
Now, are you a vegetarian also?
No. I was at one time. And we talked about that, and she said, well, I don't think it matters. I don't think it really matters. It's my way, but it's not everybody's way. But she said, I don't think it's like Jesus said, it's not what we put into our mouth that harms us, but what comes out of it. But I know that vegetarianism is very good for people, and she lived as a vegetarian.
My sense also is that she must have the same compassion that you describe that she felt for nature, she must have felt for animals too.
Oh, she did. She did. When she would be here and we had the little animals around here, they would just migrate right to her. And she'd pick them up and love them. Had a great sense of love for animals. And we talked about it. She asked me, I said, there's only one reptile that I can't stand, and that's a snake. And she said, oh, well, you'll learn to love those too. I meet them on the road, and they never bother me. So.
How about children? Did you ever see her with children?
No, I never did. Well, you bring that up. And I never did, really.
We've heard mixed reports.
I never did, even when she was here. That's right.
Did you ever try to ask her about her childhood or background?
No.
You weren't
No.
you curious?
I was curious, but I am one of those people that if you want to tell me something, I think you will. I believe that I don't have any right to ask you because you might feel you had to tell me. And I just kept feeling if I build the right relationship with peace and all, if it's ever necessary for her to speak to me about her past, she will. But it never really came up. I guess it wasn't important to either one of us. Other than reincarnation, and Lemuria must have held a real charm for her because that would come up. But no other reincarnation. That was the only one she ever talked about. To me.
Did she ever tell you any details about the time in Lemuria?
No, not really.
Just that you had
Right.
been her student.
And it seemed to just sort of end like that. I mean, she was the teacher, I was a student, and that was that, you know. But we never talked about what it was like or what she was teaching. Obviously, it was metaphysical teachings. But no, she didn't dwell too much on what the past was, just that it was important as a contact point, that in itself would generate its own whatever needed to come through either one of us.
It seemed, this thought just came into my mind. It seems like she's then been a master soul for a while.
Yes, I think so. I'm sure of it.
I mean, I gather out of the body, time is not the same, but...
Well, we talked about that. And that last night she was here, she did what many people felt was a wonderful healing experience. But the night before that, she and I had sat for a long time and just talked, and she had never talked about death before. Well, neither one of us had. But that particular night, she asked me how I felt about death, and I said, well, you know, I love Gibran, who says life and death are the same. Well, and then we talked, and she said, you know, I want you to join me in prayer. This is really what I want to ask of you tonight, that when my work here on this planet Earth is done, that I move out like that I go very quickly. Well, we agreed we both felt that way. We absolutely both felt that way. And so when the word came to me of what happened, I said, well, Peace's prayer was answered. And people thought I was a terrible human being, even though she had said that. And I said to people, you know, well, I didn't expect it to be that way. I thought maybe she would just lie down and go to sleep and that would be it. But she had made that remark and said to me, pray with me, Richard, that when I'm through, I just want to be through. I've seen this stuff of suffering and pain, and there's no need for it. There's no need for it. So when the news came to me, I was sad, of course, but I thought, well, I honor her wish. And even though I didn't like the way it happened, I had to accept that that was it.
Did you get the sense that she knew her time was close?
Yeah, I did. I had that feeling that night. Then she spoke at the next 2 morning services, and then that night. But that's the night that Peace, all of a sudden she kept looking up. And many people noticed that. She kept looking up during her talk with the people. And finally, she just came down the steps and started moving around through the congregation that was there, and she just would reach out and just touch people and say bless you and go to the next and all. Walked around, there wasn't a sound in the room as she touched these various people, and people, tears were coming down their face, and they were very moved by it. It was a really powerful moment. And when it was all over, she walked back up and she looked up again and she said, I never say goodbye, but this has been a very special night for me, and I just want to bless all of you, and I'll be seeing you. And she kind of moved out, and she didn't seem to want to mix with people. After this was over, she said, just go and be peaceful. Just go and be peaceful. Carry peace out of here with you. Take it into the streets. Take it with you. Take this gift of peace that we've just experienced. Take it out there. Take it with you. And then we went home, and I made tea, and we talked. But there was a loneliness, kind of a quiet loneliness in her, and I kept thinking, gee, I've never seen her like this. This is strange. I don't know what to think. And I went to bed, and she went to bed, and I would keep waking up, and I'd go out and see if she was all right, and she would be sleeping very nicely. And the morning came, and we had breakfast, and I said to her, are you all right? And she said, are you going to be like those other people? Stop worrying about me. Just stop it right now. So she didn't want any of that. She would stop you in a minute when you got off on any questions like that. And she said, you have the nerve to stand up there in front of those people teaching truth, and then you ask me such a question. So she really called the shots.
Do you think she was seeing angels?
I've often wondered about that. Because she asked me one time when I believed about that, had I ever seen an angel? And I said, yes. And she said, really? And I said, yes, haven't you? And she said, well, my interpretation of angels. And then that ended that. There were so many things that Peace and I talked about that you would think you were going to get into a long discussion, and bang, and that would be the end of it.
Why do you think that was?
Well, I've learned in my own life, I think what she wanted to do was make contact points. She was not only confirming her concepts and beliefs, but she had to see if other people were having similar things. And once she knew you were, she thought, well, they're okay. We're together. So we don't have to discuss something we both know. She would always look for something where you could have a sort of a real deep discussion about. But if she thought you really were confident about something, she'd let it rest. Just let it rest.
What do the angels look like that you've seen?
Well, I really believe I've seen like shadowy forces, really shadowy. And when my sister passed away, the night we were all in the house, and it was like angels hovering over her bed. And she literally said to us, don't stay in the room, go, because don't interfere. They're here to take me home. And that was my first experience of really having anyone that I was with in the death experience to speak of seeing this heavenly type vision. So I've always believed that there is something, not just in the death experience, but on our journey, that when we really need help in a very deep way, there's somebody, something there. We may not always see it, but it's there to really comfort and say, it's okay, you'll get through it, just keep moving, don't stop, keep moving with it. So I really do believe in angels.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Did you ever discuss UFOs?
No, We never did. I don't even remember. I have a feeling she would have believed in them.
Yeah, she apparently had an encounter, close encounter.
Is that right? But she never really discussed it with me, really.
Yeah. Wow. So then, after that last night where the
Yes.
healing took place, and then she slept in the breakfast, then did you drive her someplace?
To Portage, Indiana, where someone picked her up there, and I believe she was going to the home of those people in Knox. And it was this lady's husband who was driving her to, I think it was something about a dairy conference or something where she was giving a talk when this happened.
So it really was that close.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently in Ewell,
It was-
Gertrude Ward's house, she also
Right.
saw all the masters.
Yes.
That's what she called them. She said, oh, so many masters.
Uh-huh.
So they were starting to come in.
Well, I felt myself, because different people said, did you notice, Richard, how she kept, and her eyes were very soft and blue that night, and she would just look with almost like an angelic. Her face was like translucent, and her hair was just shining. You know, she had that gray, beautiful hair. And many, many people came to me and said, you know, she looked very different. But what was she looking at? So I felt later on that probably she was seeing things in the room that none of the rest of us were seeing at that time, because we were so intent on her. She was really magnetic.
Hold on 1 second. Go ahead and flip it. Did anyone mention afterwards what it felt like to be touched by her?
Oh, yes. John, one of our licensed teachers here, and he really cannot talk about it even to this day, that tears don't come to his eyes, because he said he had never had anyone touch him, that something went through him that he would never ever forget. He said her hands were just like silk, and she touched him just so gently, and just it was just like a flow of energy that went through him. And other people spoke of how when she touched them, they were almost like hypnotized. They just were spellbound by this very quiet activity that was going on, and they felt that something wonderful had happened to them by the fact that she had really touched them. And it was interesting how that morning one of our soloists had sung "He Touched Me," the hymn "He Touched Me," and many people were saying, isn't that interesting how that hymn was sung when she did the services, and then that night she literally touched us. And that was how people felt. She touched us. And one lady who had had some very difficult problems said, I just felt like the woman who touched the hem of the garment of Jesus, that when she touched me, I just felt like some great soul had really touched my life. And that woman was going through a trauma at the time, but it made a difference in her life, and I think that's what peace lived for, to make a difference in people.
I just want to take a vote on the cat. I would just soon let the cat wander. And how does anybody else feel? 'Cause
That's
it-
fine, except for right there, the tail's right in the shot.
Go. You. Hey, you. Come on.
You're welcome to
Cut it
lie
out.
down and
Cut it out.
cuddle. and-
Is the light still okay? Cause it,
Yeah.
okay, good.
Cut it out. Hey, go on. You.
Okay. Back on?
Yep.
You mentioned that she didn't always like to touch or be touched.
Right.
So tell me
Right.
about that.
She wasn't really into hugging like a lot of Unity people are. And I mentioned that to her because she would kind of bow to people. And that was obviously another memory of reincarnation, because she would say, you see, I learned to do that a long time ago. A nod of the head is better than physical contact, because she felt that you picked up vibrations from people in a very open moment like that, you could become vulnerable to some of their stuff. So that was why she wasn't heavy into hugging. But she said when she was guided, if it was right for her, and the environment created in an atmosphere was right, then she was very comfortable to just touch them, not to hug them, but to touch them. So she didn't hug anyone at that meeting, she just touched.
What about the massage?
Oh, the massage therapist. She really felt that Peace was doing a lot of standing and a lot of work, and people then would question her and talk to her, and she would just listen. And so she thought out of kindness she would go to her, and she said, I'll be very happy to give you a massage, and I'm this massage therapist, you'll feel like a new person. And nobody touches my body. I mean, the spirit takes care of me. I will have none of that. And this poor girl went away in tears because she really felt that she was giving her a gift, you know. I think financially she didn't think, well, you couldn't help her financially anyway. She wouldn't take anything. Because as I said earlier, she had these god-awful shoes on her feet. A few times and she'd say, Richard, you just have to pray with me. He's getting into all this stuff. He's getting mixed up. He's regressing. He's not going forward. And sometimes he would call and want to come out, and she would make an excuse because she didn't want to be angry with him. But she said, I feel so sad for him that he's stuck in this, what realm did she call it? Where souls get stuck.
The astral plane?
Like an astral plane. Yeah, he's too mental. He's trying to figure everything out, and he's dabbling in everything but what he should be. And he would like to, Peace, have you heard about this? Oh yeah, I've heard about it. Isn't it great? Well, not really. And she'd say, Richard, I'm just forever having to take the wind out of his sails. And she said, I'm not sure he's going to make it in this lifetime. Because he just gets into all kinds of stuff. And he really wanted her to approve of it, and she wouldn't. And another thing, somebody here at that time asked her her birthday, and I thought she would kill him. She said, oh, no way, you're not going to get into that astrological stuff with me. So then later that night I said, Peace, don't you believe in astrology? She said, it's okay, but Richard, on this journey, we either decide that we're in charge of our life or we turn our power over to something else. And many people are doing that, too many are, and what we're having is a bunch of breakdowns, a bunch of addictions, because people have no power to resist the things that are not healthy for them. They just become weakened with all of this nonsense from the world and lose their spiritual path. She really had a problem with it.
It seems to me it's one of those paradoxes, because it's power, but you don't want to be trying to will.
That's right.
So how do you understand the distinction between the power that you're talking about and will? Self-will.
Okay. The power, of course, she and I both agreed that power is of this realm, of invisible realm. Power is of God, as we name and call that energy. But strength is what we receive from the connection with that power. We are not the power, but we have strength to do what we're supposed to do, to resist temptation, whatever in life's journey. But never assume that we are the power, because the moment we do, the power will burn us out. And even that was before burnout was real popular. But she and I were talking about some of our people who had gone through difficult periods in the ministry, which they call today burnout. And she said, you see, that's what, she went into the Bible again saying, that's what it means when the zeal of your household will eat you up. When we get too zealous about something, willfully, in that sense, trying to make something happen, we burn out our power. We short-circuit our lives, and we become sort of powerless temporarily, and we may have to go through rehabilitation and so on and so forth to regain or to reestablish our power. And so she was very strong, and in our teaching ever since that time, I have never said that I'm a powerful person or that that person's a powerful person, but that person has great strength, because I was able to distinguish the difference between universal power and the power of God, and that as an offspring I have strength so long as I keep my connection through prayer and meditation with that infinite power, to let it flow through me in a loving way, that all my actions, all that I do is based on that power that is generated through love, and it's a love power. But it becomes strength in me, and through that strength I can do the things that I need to do. But she was very definite about that.
Did she seem knowledgeable about the New Testament?
In many ways, but she seemed to, or at least this is my perception, avoid talking about the man Jesus a lot. For what reason, I never knew, but she would always say the Master. And I would say, oh, you mean Jesus? And she said, no, I'm talking about the Master. Because you're still thinking about the personality of man, not the spirit in him that mastered that personality. And that's what mastery is, being able to take charge of our personality and allowing love to function as us. Excuse me. So she said, no, he was a master. He mastered and declared his complete oneness with God. He was no longer functioning on this human level where it was all ego and, I got to build a big church and prove to the people how great I am because of what I can do, what I can do, what I can do. But rather he mastered all of that ego in him that needed to get recognition from the outer world, because he got his recognition from spirit. And she said it was even Jesus said to him, this is my beloved. That the spirit was recognizing him. This is my beloved, in you I am well pleased. Which he wasn't getting this from the outside, but his own spirit was telling him, I'm proud of your behavior, because you are working through that system of love and peace and harmony. And she would, but she never too often used the name Jesus. It would always be the master spoke or the master teacher. And then I knew she meant Jesus.
Do you think she mastered her personality?
Quite well. Quite well. She was one of the most humble people I have ever known. Really one of the most humble, because many people who would acknowledge or have the gift such as peace had, I believe it could have gone in another direction. I really do. I felt as she moved about here, as she moved among people, she would have this slight bow to her head, and oftentimes she walked with her hands like this. And she would just nod, and which is spiritually the recognition of the Spirit of God in another person.
She does this in almost every photograph where she's posing. Her left hand is placed inside her right hand. Did you ever ask her about that?
Oh, that's the connection between the male and the male and female side. See, the left is the female, and the right is the male. So, I mean, it's always the combination of divine intelligence and love working together. She felt by putting her hands together that she was making a polarized, polarized power to work with, that this was a marriage, a strong marriage.
Yeah, so in the sense this is there's a Jungian analyst I've done some reading.
Yeah, Jung.
Marion Woodman?
Yes, yes.
That this is the royal marriage within.
That's right. It's the acknowledgement of the two becoming one. What God hath joined together, no man can put asunder. And she would do that. And sometimes she would sit like that. But then she would also do this, which is, I acknowledge the divine presence in you as I accept the divine presence in myself. And she was very humble about it. She didn't, I don't think Peace went around trying to reform anyone or persuade anyone. I think she just felt she wanted to be peace and do her thing. If it helped anyone, fine. But I don't know anyone that ever came here when she was with us that did not just love this woman. But she didn't want adoration. She didn't want it. If they got too close to her or tried to tell her how great she was, she would just, no, I can't handle that. I don't, just be happy. Just know you have the same thing in you. And she would really work on that. And she said, isn't it funny, Richard, how they think you as a minister or I are the only ones that have this, and they have to come to us and cling to us to get something? After you've talked to them for 2 hours, they still want to cling to you and hang on to you, thinking they've missed something. And I really was going through a struggle where we had 2 or 3 elderly women here who just clung to me, and she would watch them and she'd say, how can you tolerate that? They follow you, they clutch at you. And I said, sometimes, Peace, I just feel like I'm something down here and these vultures are descending on me. And she says, but then you have to know how to deal with those vultures. Because as long as you allow them to do that, you're giving away your God power, which is your strength. And if you don't stop it, you're going to have a physical illness. Because you can't let people drain you like that. I mean, they have to find this truth within them, and you're not helping people by letting them do that.
I think many of us are not willing to be tough love, draw
Yes.
a strong line
Yes.
with others. But she clearly did.
Oh, yes. And it wasn't offensive. I didn't think so. I mean, even with me, when I first got to know her, and I was so happy that she was my friend, So when every time I would see her, I would just want to, hang on and talk to her, and she'd say, don't do that, Richard. We're too good of friends for that. We don't need that. That's for people who don't know each other. And she said, you don't have to get acquainted with people that you know from past lives. You recognize them. And that's all that you need to do. The recognition is enough. So you don't have to go through all this getting and all this stuff of putting on and playing games to courtship and do they approve of me? How do I feel? So it was just, she said, you recognize them. You don't have to get acquainted. The people you have to get acquainted with are people you have never known before. But the people you recognize, you just keep moving. You don't have to go through that stuff.
Do you think...
Gonna change it back.
Really publish that material. She would have sort of gone.
Yeah.
But it was great that they pulled together and put that book together. I thought it was wonderful.
Are we on?
Yep.
So do you think her pilgrimage made a difference?
I do. It was like one night we talked about heroes and models and all this, and she said, well, sometimes you would question, did Joan of Arc make a difference? Undoubtedly she did, but that difference may not be recognized because it is so far in the background, but she was the beginning of something. She was the genesis moving toward a kind of freedom for people. And so sometimes we think we're the big shot making the difference, where if it had not have been for the Joan of Arcs and all the others who have sacrificed for what they believe, we wouldn't be able to stand for what we believe today. And so she talked about the heroes and how evidently our soul is picking up on what they went through, and we have it much easier today in our pilgrimage to bring peace. Where they had the real heavy load to carry, they made it easier for us, and she really felt that the next generation would go through a real drastic, I think it was the last time she was here, we talked about the New Age coming and the closing of this 2,000 years, which she said, Richard, watch yourself in the last 10 years before 2000, because it's going to be hell. It's going to be hell. But then people are going to learn that they better chain that devil in the bottomless pit in them, or it's going to perpetuate. But she saw the Bible in that way, that this angry spirit in us had to be healed and transformed into love before we could move into this age, which is supposed to be one of brotherhood, and churches will go through dramatic changes because the church will once more be recognized as the individual, that you are your church, that I respect and honor the worship that's coming through you, and we will hold each other in respect and honor, because we're not identifying that you're this or you're that, but you are a person with your own light shining forth. She really felt it, and she said this will probably go on into the first part of 2000. Then we will see a dramatic change where people are saying, well, this isn't working. This is not working the way we've lived in the past, and the way we've lived angry with each other and fighting even in religion. It doesn't work. Let's stop all this foolishness. But there is that feeling today, I think. Sometimes we don't see it because we get caught up in all the tragic stuff. We don't see that that's part of a healing that's eliminating and causing people to really look at how we are living and how our own mind is bringing forth very definite outpicturing of the way we feel.
Here's a question I have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be in denial about the cleansing.
Uh-huh.
But at the same time, I don't want to add to it with my own thought energy. So, I mean, have you ever thought about that? You know, do we add to the hell? You know, if the last decade before the turn of the millennium is supposed to be hell, if we every time we say that, are we adding to its reality?
I believe that if we are fearful and get caught up in the very talking about how negative the world is, how terrible it is, why wouldn't we spend our energy and try, if it's that as bad as we say it is, why wouldn't we convert that energy into fields of finding better ways to educate, better ways to teach, better ways in working with each other? Because I believe, as well as peace believe, that if we're putting negative energy out into this pool of thought, which is universal, we are guilty of killing, in the sense that our consciousness can kill through destructive thoughts, that those destructive thoughts become a part of a consciousness that will create situations. This is why she believed that her quietness here in this, when she would be here, and I believe that that quietness was very important to her. I told her how that I come in this building often to do a very special peace work, and I will go into every room in this building, all of them, everyone, including the washrooms, and I will declare that the presence and power of God is love, fills this space, and that love energy fills these rooms, that anything unlike God is dissolved in that energy and only peace remains. Well, she thought that was fantastic. And she said, you see, you're a pilgrim for peace, but in a different way. We're not all going to do it the same way. But I told her how I would do this. She thought it was just great. But she said, okay, then go into the world and do it. When you're driving your car, do it. When you see a cripple on the street or a blind person, speak the word. Speak the word of protection, of power. And from her, I learned to do that when I'm driving, or if someone gets nasty to you who pulls up along the side of your car, and you just smile at them and just even say it out loud, friend, I give you the gift of peace. And I built a whole service on her idea of giving spiritual gifts. So we have that service here every once in a while where nobody brings anything tangible, but we give the intangible gift, which is inexhaustible, and that is, I give you the gift of love, I give you the gift of peace, and then everybody has to come up and give their gift, whatever comes to them. I give you the gift of consciousness, I give you the gift of the spirit of freedom, and it's really wonderful how that builds an energy in a room, and there's nothing tangible given. It's all, we have background music, and each person then comes and gives that gift that is within themselves. And we talked about the difference between gifts and talents. So somebody who plays the piano says, well, I'm giving my gift to the church. Well, playing the piano is not a gift. Music is the gift. The talent is the doing it. So we have a gift of harmony, and we're giving harmony through the music. Because we have the gift of music, we can give the gift of our talent, which might be music that brings harmony, and so on and so forth. We talked about the difference between, we have gifts, but then we also have talents. And our gifts are intangibles, but our talents are the expression of that intangible thing within us that we're allowing ourselves to bring forth and develop. If it were a gift, we wouldn't have to develop it. And so it's a talent because we have to do something to bring it forth, the action phase. But the gift is in us, the gift of love is in us. But to then have a talent for loving, we have to what? Work at it. So she explained to me the difference between the gifts that Paul speaks of in the New Testament, in Corinthians and Ephesians, and how we need to then take this gift of God and convert it into a talent. So she said, don't ever think that, your talent is really your true gift. Your gift is this, which becomes then, if you pay attention to your gift, it will become your talent and prosper you. So we need to know what our gift is. Knowing our gift, then how can we take that gift and through responsibility and developing it, make it something really, make it a talent out here. The gift of speech, the gift of prophecy, to be able to take that, you have it, but it's never a talent if you just keep it as a gift. You must work at it, develop it, and bring it forth. So she would explain the difference in like words and what words meant to her. Appropriate. That's another thing that I use. She said, if you cannot accommodate a truth in your mind, which is to accept it, if you can't really believe it and have faith in it, if you cannot accommodate this thought or this gift of a thought, you will never be able to appropriate it out here in the world. If you cannot accommodate in your mind that you could be a prosperous person and have plenty to do what you need to do and share, well, you can pray and go to prosperity seminars and all this stuff forever and never appropriate it out here because it's all in your head, But you have to accommodate it, accept it totally, and then you can begin to move it into your life, into your world, as the appropriation, which becomes real to you. So she would take different words and play with them.
Did she ever talk about that there would be a point of advancement in the soul, that one wouldn't have to reincarnate?
Oh, yes.
What did she say about that?
Well, that's where I think I also learned the difference between the law and grace. Well, her concept was that all of us are going to be under the law of cause and effect until we learn the law of love, because Jesus said, I have not come to destroy the law or the prophets, but I have come that the law might be fulfilled. And I give unto you a new commandment, love ye one another. When you meet this commandment, this law, then, and only then, can you move into this state, transcend to this state of grace, where you're not under the law anymore, but you're living in grace. And that is when we learn to give, to release, and to be free. And we don't even talk about cause and effect anymore because it doesn't exist. It's a mental law. It's under the old law of cause and effect. What a man sows, he reaps. But when we rise above and transcend to grace and have the grace of God, we live by grace. I mean, we accept every day as our daily bread that what I need is going to be provided. So I'm not begging God, I need money for the rent, or I need money for this or that. Because I live under grace, those things are provided. Because I'm no longer a beggar of the universe, but I have accepted my inheritance as a son of the Most High. So we talked about things like that. But she talked about law and grace, and how in religious circles we get them so confused. And we think grace is that spasmodic thing that happens once in a while when we make the right turn. And in a way it is, because we're forgetting ourselves. If we get inspiration that says, turn at this next corner, and your head says, well, that's ridiculous, that's not where I want to go. But you do it, then you have moved under grace to avoid something that could have been cause and effect.
That's interesting.
She really got into a lot of things like that. She had a great mind of research. And another thing I learned from her was uncover, discover, and recover. If you're going around in denial in your life about who you are and what you are, you have to rediscover who you are. You know, that's a rediscovery. And then it's uncover, discover, recover. So you uncover the hidden stuff we don't want anyone to know, and then you discover who you really are, and then you recover because you have regained your rightful place in the kingdom. She would come up with these different little things that were very nice for people. They could take a hold of them as formulas, and they would remember things like that.
Hold on just a second. Or do you need to flip again?
Yeah. Caught this one. I had to take off.
Okay, well we're almost, yeah, because it's almost 4:30. I just have one more question.
Okay.
And then I have to check in with my colleagues to see if they have anything to ask. So are you back on, David?
Yes.
When are you going to turn 70?
Next August.
Okay, so next August. There's another plane.
Yeah.
But here's my question to you. I mean, do you have any inkling of what's in store for you?
Not really. I really don't. But I find myself in the last, probably since the first of this year, going through a process that I'm not sure I understand humanly. But I'm allowing myself to go through it because I go to bed at night, but I will wake up almost during the night, every night around 2 o'clock, and maybe awake until 4 o'clock before. And I lie there because I have believed, and this is my belief, and I had told Peace about this too, which it hasn't happened for this span of time before, but I had believed, and I used to tell people that if you wake up at night, it's like someone who's been in prayer has now turned the work over to you, and you are awakened so you can spend that time in prayer. And then when you have obviously finished your prayer time, you will be free to fall asleep, and someone else, it's passed on to someone else. And these are the what we call the high watch, the people, the souls who keep the high watch for humanity. So I have found that that's been happening a lot to me, and I don't get upset with it or disturbed. I really spend that time in prayer, and I find myself just kind of traveling out in my mind to different places, and I let anyone who comes, some people I don't even recognize, and I just bless them and say prayers, not prayers and change their life or this, but just blessing, the gift of peace, and you feel certain things. It's been very interesting to me. So I don't know if this is some kind of preparation, getting me ready for something I might be doing in the future. I'm not really sure, but Peace and I talked a lot about the mystical experience, and I find that during these times I really am asking Spirit to show me a more mystical side of life, that I can release my attachment on buildings, places, people, and things, and really move into more of a quiet period of life and a mystical, which doesn't mean inactivity. It just means that you will do it in a quieter way, and maybe in an unknown way that people are not even aware of what you're doing. And I feel kind of interested in that. So I can't tell you that I know what I'm going to do, but I feel that there is something, really something for me to do, and I believe that Peace helped me to if it hadn't have been for her in my life and her way of life, I'm not sure I would be able to deal with some of the things I've dealt with in the last 8 months. I mean, I would, but not in a positive way like I have. I could have believed that there was something interrupting or erupting in my life, and and I might have gotten a little frightened about it, but I've been very peaceful about these kind of interesting periods, and I have very unusual dreams that I don't really understand. I don't even try to understand them because I've found myself in real chaos in a dream. And I've never been hurt or anything, but I seem to be walking into places where healing is very important, where it's needed. I've been in war zones and things like that where I see all this, and I recently saw this plane go into the water, and all of a sudden I seemed to be there, and I said, oh, I'm so grateful that all the people got out before the plane really went totally under. Just things like that are very unusual. And I had gone to Switzerland many years ago and gone and taken some work at the Ionian Institute. And I know these, but I'm not trying so much anymore as to analyze them or as just to think maybe I'm a soul, a light at a point ministering to a need that I don't even need to identify. I just need to be there. But if I could identify it, I might feel I was important. Do you understand what I'm saying? I might think that I played a real big role, where this way you just feel you were a light there and that's all you needed to be.
If Peace Pilgrim could see this movie, is there something you'd like to say to her?
Oh, I just love her. And I thank her for the gift of her life. Her willingness to incarnate, to bring this light to the planet again.
Well, I could go on and on, but I'm aware that it's 4:30. Wow, thank you.
I'm trying to find some pictures I have of her. I've looked everywhere. And I know I have them.
Well, I want to tell you quickly what we learned
Yes.
at her death, which is we'd always heard that she was killed instantly, possibly even thrown from a car, pretty gruesome. And when we went to the road where we knew from the accident report and stuff, there's a dip, a little bridge, and it's a dangerous area and there are frequent accidents. But we knocked on doors until we found someone who actually witnessed the accident right outside his house. He said he'd never seen anything like it. It was an explosion. And he's in the collision repair business, and he said he had never seen anything like this. So he and his wife went rushing out, and Yule was a mess. The girl driving the other car was unhurt, really upset. And
Wasn't she on drugs?
No, that was also another
tale.
16, 18 years old on her way to work.
Right.
And just something fell on the floor. She
reached for it.
Was heading for a mailbox, overcompensated, was in the dip. Nobody saw the other,
See, somebody told that she'd been smoking pot.
Well, that didn't come up in any of the people we talked to. I mean, it may be true,
Someone who went to the emergency room at the hospital.
Yeah, it may be.
Yeah, that's possible.
But anyway, so this guy goes to the car. Yule's a mess. Peace Pilgrim hadn't the wherewithal to sit back against the seat, although later it was determined her neck was broken and her chest was crushed. But he said she was unmarked. Her eyes were open. She seemed disoriented. She's still alive, and she lived for about 5 to 10 minutes. He said he was totally surprised when she died because he didn't think there was anything wrong with her.
Well, she was through. She was through. I know her sister said to me, just pray for that girl. Just pray for that girl, that she can find peace. And peace would have wanted the same thing.
Did you ever
Weren't
try
they
to
in a...
contact the girl? Did you ever try
No,
to?
I
Some
didn't.
people
I
do.
did not feel she needed another person contacting her, really. Because there were some crazy stories that came out of all of it. And I just didn't want to get into it. Just didn't want to be bothered with it. Because I would be having calls that were talking about this tragic event. And maybe there is something wrong with me, but I did not feel the tragedy of the event. I mean, it was a tragedy to lose a friend, which I feel that way about my friends. But I thought, well, you know, one of the last things she said to me before she left here was, when my work is done, I want to go quickly. And we both had agreed to that sort of thing. And so I assumed, as crazy as it was, that this was, I would hope that wouldn't be the answer to my prayer, but I thought, well, obviously we don't know. I mean, when we set those things up.
Do you have time for one more story?
Sure, I want to.
There's a young man in Spain who has been, when he found Peace Pilgrim's book, absolutely recognized it as authentic truth. And he had an opportunity. He's the one whose original pledge made it possible for us to go on this journey.
Things that came up and that we would talk about.
So great you found each
It was
other.
really, because I was telling her how, well, and Gene Houston helped me with that too, but I was born feet first on a farm in Ohio, and I was what they called in those years a blue baby, and then in my teens I had rheumatic fever, and then at
Was
20...
that the healing that you spoke about? Was
One
the-
of them.
Mhm.
And so Peace said, oh, I think it's so wonderful. So what? And I thought, what's wonderful about that? And she said, you see, your feet came before you. Your understanding came before you. You're not on a head trip in this incarnation. And I thought that was pretty cute. Thank you.
Tony, thank you.
You're welcome. I gotta go. I
Okay,
gotta
thanks, Tony.
unload
See-
the truck at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
See ya.
Lovely filming session.
We'll make sure you have all the information.
Yeah, leave
All
me
the
something.
details.
I would like to know something about it. I'd like to show it every
But
so
it was
often.
really,
Good.
she
Yeah.
was a remarkable
About a year or
person.
so now before you got
Absolutely
let you
remarkable,
know.
but she kept
Okay.
warning me, because I like to investigate things. She said to me, okay, but you've got to get past that. You've got to begin to do your work inside yourself. Because she would get so upset with this Maury, I tell you. He would drive her up a tree. And she would get a little bit fresh with him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We can see why. We met him too.
Isn't he a character?
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's also something completely endearing about him, which...
I think he's a very fearful man. That's my interpretation of his life. I think he's very fearful. And it seems to me he's had some deep tragedy that he is not willing to talk about or face.
In this lifetime?
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, I think so.
I wonder if he's not remembering something from his World War II experiences, which he felt were quite magical.
I know. But that's a way of pretending it didn't
Right.
happen.
Yeah.
See, fantasy will replace reality. I mean, when we can't handle reality, we will move into fantasy to kind of put things so we don't have to really work with them.
Yeah, and you get a sense that that's where he is in the
Because he would
fantasy.
get off.
Complete.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a little bit off.
Yeah. Because I had talked about my World War experiences, and he, which I was very fortunate. But I knew, even when the three of us would be together, that he wasn't realistic about things. It's like a lot of Unity people who are not feeling good inside, but will say everything's wonderful. I believe that we have to be open about our feelings, and when we can, then the wonder takes place, because we're not burying stuff in us. We just, and we both talked about that. She said, the greatest gift life can give you is a friend who will love you and trust you and be open with you completely. And I think that's what I had with Peace, because I felt very free to discuss anything with her. I really did. I just felt absolute. I didn't think there was anything I could say to her that she would ever feel shocked or feel, cause me to feel guilty or anything. She was a powerful woman. And there was we got to the house one night, and she walked in, and I don't want to give the impression that she was a psychic, but we just got through the door, and she said to me, "Whew, who's Robert?" And I thought, what is wrong with you, girl, And I said, "Robert, there's a lot of Roberts. I had a brother that was Robert." And she said, No. No. So we were, I got dinner on the table, and we were eating. And I said, "Oh, my roommate in college was Robert, and we had done some planning and had dreams, but he was killed in the Second World War." And she said, "Well, let it go. He's all right. He's all right. Now just don't talk about it anymore." But things like that would come up. She would never explain it. It would be a 1-minute thing, and it would be over, and you didn't dare kind of say, "Well, how do you know that?" Or "What the hell are you talking about?" You couldn't do that with her. This is it, period.
Was she like a big sister?
I think so. I think she was, really. I had a great relationship with my mother. We weren't mother and son, we were friends. But I felt the same way with Peace. We were like brother and sister, but more than that, we were friends. Really, she was powerful. Once you got to know her, when I first knew her, I thought she was kind of an eccentric. And then after being with her a while, I thought, God, this woman is a mystic. I really believe she was a great mystic. Don't they have any, do the newspapers have any documentations of her travels? Because where she was filmed coming into cities and things like that.
Yeah. Swarthmore has 9 boxes on her.
Wow.
Yeah, she would send clippings to them as she would travel, and also the bulletins where she spoke. So we didn't take the time to literally, connect the dots. But there's a woman who in Valparaiso, Indiana, who was the last to interview her as a newspaper reporter a few days before she died. A woman named Mary Leonard, who was changed in the 1 hour of the interview. And Peace seemed to have opened up to her in a way she never did to reporters. And Mary's retired now and is contemplating taking on the responsibility of doing a biography.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
But she's going to have a rough time getting all the information, won't she?
Well, I think...
We've gathered a lot of it on this trip.
Yeah.
I bet you have.
But with Hemet and the Rushes, and also Swarthmore
And her family.
and her family. Yeah, those 3
You know,
points.
as with peace, there's circles of information, and there's very surface stuff, there's very public stuff,
Yeah.
and then there's very
Deep.
deep stuff.
And I think that's the part of her I knew, that deep side of her. Because, I mean, there were times that she didn't want music on, like when we would pray together, sit in the quietness and just not pray out loud, but just together, to be together in prayer. In quietness, I would say, should I put a tape on? Well, why would you put a tape on? I thought we were going to be in the silence. I mean, having music playing is not silent. So I said, okay, no tape. But you know, it would be wonderful sitting with her in just the quietness, and then if something would come to her, she'd say, Richard, I have this feeling, and then she'd say it, or if something would come to me, we would then talk with each other, and that's what we considered praying together. But she didn't want music playing. She said, you know, this is ridiculous in the spiritual life that people think they have to have noise. Music is a therapy, and that's good to quiet your nerves and get ready for prayer, but when you're really ready to be serious about the silence, turn the music off. She had definite ideas. She really did. But I never knew she had family. She would not talk about her husband. Wasn't their home in New York State?
Originally New Jersey and then
Oh, New Jersey.
In Philadelphia.
Oh, Philadelphia. She just would not. So I would get little pieces from other people, which wasn't always accurate. Then I'd find out later that wasn't true. But then when this happened, I talked to her sister. Her sister was very open with me. And her sister must be up in years now.
early 80s, just about to turn 80.
I think in late 70s.
Yeah.
Because Peace,
She's 6 years older.
Was born in 1908.
she would have been in her 80s.
And you're 6 years apart.
Yeah. But she would write, and she had a lot of her mail go to her sister. Even when she would be here, she would always write to her sister. And only once in all the time I knew Peace did she ever ask me if she could make a long-distance call to her sister. And I assumed then she meant like a sister in spirit, because she would talk about those things. And it never registered with me until after this happened. And then it came back to me very clear that night. She said, and it never struck me that this was a real
Blood sister.
blood sister. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to
So
go
great.
teach a class.
What do you teach?
I'm teaching an interpretation of the Old Testament with the background in Kabbalah,
Great.
numerology,
Great.
and the cipher of Genesis.
Great.
See, I had taken a course with Rabbi Kellerman, if you
I've
have
heard of
ever
him.
heard him,
Mhm.
a long time ago. And I think the Old Testament is real difficult for Gentiles to understand. I really do. Because they don't understand the Jewish mind or the Jewish mysticism or the numerology that went with and the symbols. So we have fun working with, what does this mean to you? If you were just to, okay, what does a calf mean to you? What does a golden calf? I mean, a calf now. Think of a golden. Why would the Israelites build a golden calf? Why? And see, I try to get the people to think, because I don't want them to believe there's one system of enlightenment, but each person has to find their system, and their interpretation is going to clarify things for them until they can get a different interpretation. So we do a lot of stuff with game playing, and why was Noah 40 days? Why was it 40 years in the wilderness? Why 40? I mean, why couldn't
What
it
is
have been
40? Do you have any ideas?
Well, I mean, for me, well, Solomon's temple, the four square. See, and it's foundation. If your name or if your year is a number 4, you know, for some reason, then that would mean that this incarnation or this period in your life would be a time to build. It's a building number. But you can't build without a foundation. So what you're doing, if you have a 4 number, you're really building literally a foundation so that your life has something to stand on.
That's so interesting. I've known so many people who at age 44 finally began to undertake building a foundation for
Yeah.
the second
Well,
half.
that would be an 8, see, but that's your double 4. And you got 2 circles, which is the combination of the 4, which would be then you're both building of the foundation to have a firm place going back to creation, a firmament. Okay, you can have lots of good ideas, but if you don't have some solid stuff to put them on, they're just gonna fantasy. So even the work you're doing now, you have waited long enough to prepare a foundation, and that foundation, which obviously you have, will now begin to be a magnet to draw interested people who are going to be supporting you financially. As more people hear about it, will support you financially in your project. I really believe that, because it's a project that's going to hold a lot of interest, and it's going to bring a lot of good to a lot of people. I mean, people here would love, you know, having it and sharing it. It would be good. But so we get into stuff like that, which it's not all the gory stuff of the Old Testament, but because that's always about our
The
struggle.
symbolism.
That's our struggle. You know, it's our struggle between the human, conceptualized humanity and our spirituality, which in the New Testament it's the Armageddon, which is our struggle between our human self and where I'm going as a spiritual idea in the mind of God. I mean, and how can I live my humanity and still be a spiritual person? And we think they're 2 separate things. And as long as we think they're separate, it is a struggle, because we're not together. We don't see our humanity as also our spirituality. Because if you don't have your humanity, you don't have the vehicle to bring your inner self through. Like you folks having this dream of doing this wonderful project. You know, you've started, but you will. I think it's going to be something fantastic. I really do. I really do. And it's great. You know, I just love when young people are doing things, you know. They don't put this stuff on TV. The beautiful things that I know young people are doing, who are really helping underprivileged children and getting out there. I mean, they never have a showing. It's all the violence, all the junk that's going on. And these beautiful kids that are doing great things, I mean, I feel that that's part of my work, really, I think, in trying to support and think, know of ways to bring income to support projects to help young people. It's been too much of a put down for the young, I feel. I've seen young people who've come to me and talk about their family life, and they didn't feel loved, they didn't feel, well, they know they were born into that family, but was it a family? Were they really wanted? I mean, are their parents still interested enough to care about them? And it's, it's real interesting. I like young people because, well, we have no future without you. I mean, you are our future, so. And I think it's very demanding of us to give the best to you that we can, because what we give to you, which hopefully is our best, will be what you can build on. Besides the best you bring to that experience. And that's what I'm trying to get these, because the church in Chicago is it's a yuppie kind of a place. It's a real, and I would say that it's real interesting because about 60% of the people in the church are gay, lesbian, and drug addiction. It's a really interesting place, and all these people, now I could not really conduct that ministry the way Mike does, but he is such a fabulous person, and obviously in his own life, that he can really mix with all these characters, and I have one in the class that really is, it's not funny, but see, I didn't know it wasn't a woman. This gal comes sailing through the door, dressed and all done up, and so at the break time, she comes up to me, and she said, "Oh, Jesus, am I glad that my friend called me," and she said, "Honey, you get your ass out of bed and get over here to this class. This man is unreal." And here she's talking to me, and I'm looking at it. I said, "God almighty," And so she said, "Okay, I'm getting myself a cup of coffee." Well, she took off, and later she came up and hugged me and just carried on. And here, one of the people then, who's kind of helping in the class, came up and said, "Do you know her?" And I said, "No, I really." They said, "Well, that's a man in drag." A transvestite, I guess they call it. And I tell you, I nearly fainted. See, I'm not shocked easily, but that one really fooled me, And so when she's going out the door after the class is over, she's waving. "I'll see you next Tuesday." And I thought, God help me.
That's so great.
Well, I knew that there were such people, but I didn't think. And then I find out through Mike that they had a little problem in the Sunday school because she was teaching Sunday school. And I thought the kids are probably having a ball, and they had problems with some parents, and so they've had to take her out of Sunday school. Now, evidently she spends her life dressed like this, living as a woman.
That's so interesting. My feeling is that all of this is all part of this.
What's going on?
Yeah, but that we are in process of shedding the polarization.
Yeah, and the junk.
Yeah.
And really, she's nice, very nice person, extremely, and dresses beautifully. Her hair is just gorgeous, and there are no traces of whiskers, or I don't know if she went through.
So maybe she's a transsexual. That means an operation.
No, she didn't have. No, she's a man.
Yeah.
I mean, like after she got to know me, so then there's this black fellow who helps me with the class, and he said, "How well do you know her?" And I said, "I didn't know her at all. Why?" And he said, "Oh, she's just crazy about you." And I said, "Well, that's good." And so last week, she says to me, Would you ever consider coming over for dinner?